Welcome to Retro Vapes. Okay, that was really terrible, but this is another episode of Retro Vapes with me, Basilray from VapeTV.com. So as promised, we're getting back to the heart of regular videos from yours truly, and we're going to kick it off with an old school vape. Excuse me, and we can kind of say old school because vaping has been around for a few years now. So if you look out, you can catch some people who've been vaping for 3, 4, 5 years. I'm at 2.5 myself. And when I was just starting to vape, this was somewhat of a pretty talked about device. So this is the CJB, or Carlos Juice Box. The idea here is that it was a box mod made out of this kind of standard plastic battery project box, and it was very customizable. There's a few things under the hood that make this a really unique retro vape to go back and take a look at. And there's a couple of things that this has really influenced in today's world. So on the outside, this box is painted and clear coated. It's got kind of this green sparkle paint job to it. And one of the things you could do is you could get Carlos, who made these, to put special graphics on them. So this one, I got this secondhand, picked this up off the ECF Classifieds. The previous owner, who was the original owner, wanted this waffle box graphic here. So it's a stack of waffles with butter and syrup on it, and it says waffle box. You could have gotten many different things. If anyone remembers the old reviewer, Mooby Ghost, he had a black sparkle box just like this, and it had the Ghostbusters logo on it. So the idea here is that this was really the first juice-fed device that was commercially available for all intents and purposes. This is kind of it was out around the same time as, if anyone remembers the old MP1 or the Mr. Puffer. These were kind of at the time the start of the juice-fed or feeding revolutions, which has worked its way all the way up to being, essentially tanks where you're drowning a cartomizer in liquid. So uses an old 801 cartridge mouthpiece here, so you could replace this yourself if you had some 801 cartridges. A nice kind of clicky button, and we'll take a closer look at the internals here, but let's just take a rip here. So from a performance standpoint, this is a really finicky, tricky device, and there's several reasons for that under the hood, which we're going to take a look at in a minute. Looking back on this, I'll say it up front here, I can see why people might have liked this, and I can see why this might have turned people off to vaping entirely when they just got started. So I'm going to take one more long, extended, super wild drag here, and we're going to get under the hood of the CJB and see what made this puppy tick. Alright, so here we go, CJB, Carlos Juice Box, up close and personal. So we're going to pop this bad boy open, and here's another kind of look at this waffle box logo. If you look real close, you can see that it, I don't know if it was glue or the clear coat that maybe went over it, kind of bled a bit under the graphic, which is a bummer because it would otherwise be kind of just a fun little personalized touch. This is also one of those kind of first early devices that was completely customizable, and you could get it personalized, much like the Chuck. So, it's kind of in that ways, they were some of the first devices that you could really truly personalize and call your own. So internally here, we got a few things going on. Here is an 18650 battery, and here's the juice bottle. So this has its own integrated feed system, which we will pop the battery out and take a look at. So this utilizes one of these little 10 mil kind of round Boston style bottles. And you simply squeeze it, and it pushes juice up here through this. I believe this is just a JB welded kind of piece that holds the bottle in place and allows the bottle to screw in. And feeding is pretty simple. You got these nice squishy Boston round bottles. So to fill it or refill it, you simply kind of pop this out and unscrew the bottle, screw in a new one. You can kind of see here. Simply just push it out, unscrew it, screw on a new one, and you're good to go there. What really makes this special, though, is this homemade proprietary atomizer. So here we can kind of see it. It really is just a piece of copper tubing, and you unfortunately can't see inside very well to really see what's going on. I've never been able to track down a schematic. So the mouthpiece is simply just a piece of rubber tubing that has an 801 cartridge mouthpiece jammed into it. So it's kind of just pressure fit here. So that's really all this is, just an 801 atomizer cartridge. And this piece of tubing, which does have a hole popped in it here, you can see mine is probably seen cleaner days, just stained from nicotine and juice and vapor, all that good jazz. So we can really pop this whole thing out. So here is the atomizer and feed system. It's all kind of one continuous piece. You could also take it completely out of the box by unclipping it here to feed it. So unfortunately, internally, we can't really see in there. Even if I grab something like a flashlight to try and shine it in there for you, let me do that here. And there's not much we can realistically see in here. Oops, without some sort of almost microscope camera. So if you look, even trying to just shine it in, I've never really been able to get it to a point where I can, in person, see inside of it. We also can't really meter the resistance of this easily because of the way it's set up. I suppose what we could do is if we can get this to unclip, there we go, we could take a multimeter to it, and rather than trying to go through double camera view, this kind of just came to me, so I'm simply going to try and get a reading off of this by using these connectors here, and we'll see what it comes out to. So let's get one in here. Whoop. This connector's kind of small for the prongs for my multimeter, so this may take a little bit of finesse and finagle. Very technical vaping terms, finesse and finagle. So let me try and put one here. Yeah, there's just not really a good way to go about this. Maybe I just did it though. Oh, but I can only get one in at a time. Arr, frustration. Let me try one more way here, and that is simply going to be to touch it up to the connection points on the back. So let's see here. We got 1, 2. And this is reading 1.5 ohms, 1.4 ohms, kind of bouncing back and forth. So, I mean, really this is about the first low resistance atomizer. It's pretty much the first commercially available homemade atomizer that was put out on the market. So you can see I've had a little bit of juice leak out of the mouthpiece here. Let's just wipe that up. So the atomizer is not really adjustable. It's also a very cool vape because in order to really get good vapor, you have to take in so much air from this air intake hole that's drilled on the side. So on a traditional atomizer or cartomizer such as a 510, so here, let me grab a 510 atomizer. This one's sealed on the bottom. But you either have an air hole here on the bottom or here on the sides. You don't have that luxury here with the CJB atomizer, so it's drilled on the side. That's also where the hole lines up from the mouthpiece kind of gasket here, if you will. You line these two over each other. You can kind of choke it off a little bit. In my experience, choking it off left you with a pretty harsh and vaporless vape. Does produce good flavor, next to no throat hit, just with this style of atomizer, and the flavor's good, the vapor is okay, and no throat hit. From a performance standpoint, the feed system here, I mean, it works, but this is kind of the inherent problem with the CJB, is that it tends to flood. So it's really hard to get this, because the bottle presses so easily, and it all fits together, that it's so hard to get the optimum amount of juice here to this proprietary atomizer to really produce a good vape without flooding it or giving you lots of dry hits. A simple squeeze is just going to produce a lot of liquid. So let's just kind of give it a squeeze. It's a pretty light squeeze. And now if we watch here, we will probably, and here it comes already. So that was a really light squeeze. We already know juice dripped out of it. And here's 3 good sized drops, and there's a 4th smaller one coming. That's kind of the problem, that the feed system, well, it did do what it set out to accomplish, right? Which is feeding an atomizer. It didn't do it very consistently. That's probably the biggest flaw with the CJB. So there's a look back in time at the Carlos juice box. Mine was dubbed the Waffle Box by its original owner. And there's a few things that I think are really cool and pretty revolutionary about the Carlos juice box. for its time period, which was really 2 years ago. This was available for a while beyond the kind of time I started vaping back in April of 2010, but it was on its way out, and it was ultimately replaced by things that kind of consider or should consider the Carlos juice box, its predecessor, being the Rio Grande, at one point the Elite E, and the Journeyman, which are no longer available. But all these other juice-fed mods really pay homage back to the initial idea that was put, really hit the market here with the Carlos juice box. And in a lot of ways, as we said, those of you who use low resistance atomizers really owe Carlos a bit of thanks, because for all intensive purposes, this was the first low resistance atomizer that was ever really produced. And those of us that are, using things like the Line V2 or these other rebuildable atomizers that are kind of really become the rage right now in vaping, we really need to think back and just, every once in a while, vape one out for Carlos, because this was one of the very first rebuildable atomizers that was ever available commercially. So performance-wise, the vape is very cool. It runs on one 18650. I wouldn't recommend stacking batteries if you had one of these. I don't think the circuitry and the switch is capable of really handling that kind of voltage. It may be able to for a short time, but if you pick one of these up or find one of these, 6 volts is probably not the way to go, especially with this atomizer. There's a few things that are inherently wrong with the device. We kind of looked at some of those when we looked at it. Ultimately, this is a really finicky, fiddly device because of that feed mechanism like we talked about. At the time, was this like bleeding edge of where vaping was potentially headed? Absolutely. For that, we can give it a fine salute as a retro vape. If you still have one of these, take it out every once in a while, give it a vape, think back to how much better vaping is now, put it back on the shelf and go on with your merry way. Had I been reviewing this device at the time that it was, really prevalent and popular and available commercially, I probably wouldn't have given it a very good review, simply because performance-wise, they're so much better. But again, at the time, this was the vape to have. So let's look back at the Carlos Juice Box, or CJB, from a couple years ago, and this installment of Retro Vapes. Feel free to tune in Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, over on VapeTVLive.com. Follow me, Twitter at Basilray, Facebook.com/Basilray, ECF, New Vapor, Vapors Forum, all the forums. I'm pretty much out there somewhere. And of course, the Basil phone, 612-293-6405. It's my pleasure to bring you a video, and I say it at the end every time because it's important to me. Please, by all means, until we see each other again, take care.